Here in Crosse, Wisconsin. It's a beautiful town. We appreciate y'all coming out. I'm sad this is actually my last visit to the state of Wisconsin for this election, but that's okay. I promise I will come back as your Vice President of the United States because we're going to win this thing. Now, I want to recognize a few people who are very special guests who have decided to join us. I'd never met him before, but long been an admirer of the great Governor Tommy Thompson. Where are you, Tommy? Thank you, man. God bless you. We've got Representative Tom Tiffany with us. Tom, where are you, man? Tom, God bless you, man. Thank you. We got Representative Derek Van Orden. Derek, where are you, man? Thank you. And we got Chairman of Wisconsin GOP, Brian Schimming. Brian, thank you, man, for doing such a good job for us. And last but certainly not least, my favorite person here, no offense to any of you, fine people, is my beautiful wife, Usha. I love you, honey. Thanks for going around with us. But look, it's very simple here. We are done with early vote, which means that tomorrow is our last chance. Tomorrow is the last day. Tomorrow is the big day when we are going to vote in very big numbers in the state of Wisconsin. We're going to vote for change. We're going to vote for American prosperity. We're going to vote for Donald J. Trump to be the President of the United States. And the Secret Service told me that, I guess Tim Walz is going to be here in the state of Wisconsin. I'm sorry about that. I know we're close to Minnesota, so you guys know Governor Tim Walz well. But here's what I want to say. I know a lot of you, like me, are praying people of faith, and I want you to spare a prayer for Governor Tim Walz, because if you think about this, I know all of us have had hard days at work. Your back hurts, your hands are tired, but I don't think any of us have ever had the kind of day that Tim Walz is going to have today, where he's got to go around and convince the American people that Kamala Harris can be the President of the United States. That's tough work. That is a tough job, my friends. I think that's the toughest job in the United States of America, because think about it. As much as Kamala Harris pretends that she's something that she's not, and as much as Kamala Harris runs away from Joe Biden, you would think that Kamala doesn't even know who Joe Biden is, even though she's his vice president. Kamala Harris, we know, she's more of the same. Kamala Harris is more of the same high grocery prices. Kamala Harris is more of the same unaffordable housing. Kamala Harris is more of the same chaos around the world. And Kamala Harris is more of the same wide open border. So tomorrow, Wisconsin, let's vote for a new direction for this country. Let's vote for Donald J. Trump to be the President of the United States. Now, it's crazy to me that Kamala Harris pretends to be the person who somehow is going to change the direction of the country, even though she's the sitting Vice President of the United States. I've never seen anything like it. You would think that she has nothing to do with the policies of the last 4 years. She goes around and gives these speeches where she says, on day one, I'm going to fix the affordability crisis affecting American citizens. Or she'll say, on day one, we're going to close down that southern border. And all of us with common sense are saying, Kamala, day one was 1,400 days ago. What the hell have you been doing the whole time? Go do your job. Stop talking about your job and go and do it. If Tim Walz has got the hardest job in American politics, I believe that I've got the easiest job in American politics. Because think about this. All I've got to do is go around the United States, go around beautiful places like the state of Wisconsin, and get to tell people the truth. The truth is that when Donald J. Trump was president, inflation was at 1.5%. When Donald J. Trump was president, wages were fast rising at the fastest rate in 40 years in the United States of America. When Donald Trump was president, the border was secure and the world was at peace. That's a hell of a record to run on. And look, it's so simple. You know, for the first election in the lifetime of every single person in this country, we have an opportunity not just to compare the plans and the promises. You know, you go to Kamala Harris's website and half of it's copied from Donald J. Trump. You know, I told the president a few weeks ago, you know, because we came out with this policy, President Trump did. He said no taxes on tips. Let's give our hardworking servers more of their money. And then 2 days later, Kamala Harris came out and said she agrees with that policy. Or, you know, of course, one of the hallmarks of this campaign is that President Trump and I are talking about the importance of securing the southern border. But then Kamala Harris, all of a sudden, she's got religion, my friends, on border security. The border czar for 3.5 years of open borders now says she agrees with Donald J. Trump on borders. I said to the president, look, she's going to show up on the Monday before the election with a red MAGA hat and a Navy suit because she's recognized that people are so frustrated with Kamala Harris's actual policies. They're so frustrated with what Kamala Harris has done to this great country that they're ready to take America in a new direction. And I think the thing that Kamala Harris has been doing over the last few months is trying to pretend that she is going to fix what Kamala Harris broke. And I think the people of Wisconsin are smart enough to recognize when they've got a politician like Kamala Harris who's trying to sell them snake oil. We know that Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote on trillions of dollars of new spending. We know that Kamala Harris bragged about opening the border and then did exactly that. We know that Kamala Harris implemented the terrible tax policies that have led to sky-high inflation. We know that Kamala Harris went to war on American energy. My friends, it's very simple. We are going to say to Kamala Harris tomorrow, you are fired. We want to go back to common sense leadership. We want to go back to Donald Trump. Now, you just look at the statistic. You just look at the statistics of what's going on in this country, and my heart breaks for our fellow citizens, people all across the state of Wisconsin who are working hard, they're playing by the rules, but thanks to Kamala Harris's policies, they're falling farther and farther behind. You know that credit card delinquencies in this country are now over 9%. That means 1 in 10 of our fellow citizens can't even pay their bills right now. About 1 in 12 of our fellow citizens are delinquent on their auto loan repayments. That means a lot of our fellow citizens can't even afford to pay their car payment because of what Kamala Harris has done to this country. We know that grocery prices in this state are higher by 20%. Gas prices are higher by 45%. You go through the list of everything, and you realize that the American people are struggling, and they're struggling because Kamala Harris hasn't done her job. Now, the most damaging statistic, I think, is the one that came out a couple of days ago, because Kamala Harris is going around the country bragging about the fact that her economy is doing well. Do we think the economy is doing well in this room? Do we think our citizens are doing well? Of course we don't, because we talk to people. We live in this country. We recognize that our people are struggling. But, you know, the jobs report that came out a couple days ago said that 28,000 private sector jobs had been lost. 46,000 manufacturing jobs had been lost. And then you look at the top line number and it says 12,000 jobs have been created. And you realize that it's all of Kamala Harris's friends in the government bureaucracy. We created government jobs. We created jobs for bureaucrats while all of our neighbors and friends are struggling in this economy. And I got to tell you, when Donald Trump is president, we're going to get back to a golden age of American prosperity. The private sector is going to hire workers instead of firing workers. But there is one person in the United States of America who deserves to lose her job. And tomorrow, let's make it happen for Kamala Harris. Let's get her out of Washington. You know, I know we've got a lot of people who are going to watch the clips, watch the news reports tonight, and I think our message to the swing voters of the state of Wisconsin is very simple. It doesn't have to be like this. You don't have to agree with everything that I say, every policy proposal that we have. You don't have to agree with everything that Donald J. Trump says. But what we know is that when Donald Trump was president, you could afford to pay your bills. What we know is that when Donald Trump was president, we had a president who fought for border security for American citizens. What we know is that when Donald Trump was president, wages were rising as fast as they had in a generation in the United States of America. So the question for the people of Wisconsin is very simple. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And I think that most of us would say absolutely not. And the answer, if you're not better off than you were 4 years ago, if you're struggling with groceries in a way that you weren't 4 years ago, if you're pissed off because they're arresting Mexican drug cartel members as far north as the state of Wisconsin, then it's very simple. Remember, Kamala Harris broke it and Donald J. Trump will fix it. We just got to get him there. Now, I will say, look, let me be bipartisan here for a second. I asked you to say a prayer for Tim Walz, and I want to say something nice about Kamala Harris, because the one thing, you guys are all pissed off. It's okay. It's okay. The one thing I'll say nice about Kamala Harris is while she's been a terrible vice president, and while we know our fellow citizens are struggling because of her policies, she is really good at getting us votes when she does interviews. So that's one thing. I think when Kamala does an interview, I think when Kamala does an interview, we pick up about 50,000, 100,000 votes. That's one thing she's awfully good at, because here's the thing. Think about this. Every time Kamala's in front of a teleprompter, every time Kamala Harris has a script in front of her, you watch these TV ads where she runs as far away from her record as possible, what she says is totally different from what she's actually done. And in so many ways, Kamala Harris is part of the same failed generation of career politicians who say one thing during campaign season and say something else when they're actually in government. That's really all Kamala Harris is. And that's what was so different about Donald J. Trump. Think about this. He went in there and said, we're going to unleash American energy, and that's exactly what we did. He went in there and said, we want to make groceries and all of the necessities of life more affordable for our citizens, and that's exactly what he did. He said, we're going to get in there. We're going to knock out ISIS and make America respected in the world again, and then he did it. This is what's different about Donald Trump and a generation of career politicians. Donald Trump fixes things. The career politicians break them. But I will say, look, you're never going to hear me complain about this job, because I will say, other than being married to that beautiful woman over there, the honor of my lifetime is to get to run and ask all of you to make me your next vice president. I'm having so much fun out here. We're having a good time. A lot of you know I grew up in a poor family. My grandmother didn't even graduate from high school, the grandmother who raised me. And now here I am getting to hang out with you fine people on a Monday morning, ask you to make me the next vice president of the United States. That's a great testament to our country. It really is. So I love doing this. You'll never hear me complain, save this one time. I'm going to say there's one complaint that I'm going to offer, and it's that, I watch Kamala Harris do her interviews so that you don't have to. That is the act of service. That's the act of service that I engage in. Is a couple of weeks, I watch Kamala Harris on The View, and I'm telling you, I'm going to tell you about it. And for the next 24 hours, we need you as sharp as possible. Do not go and watch this interview, because you'll lose about 20 IQ points if you do it. And we need you as sharp as possible, getting people out there to vote, getting your friends, your family, your neighbors to the polls. But here's what she said. And remember, her whole campaign is that somehow she's going to fix what we know Kamala Harris broke. And they ask her, what is one thing that you would have done differently over the last 4 years? Think about the inflationary policies. Our fellow citizens can't afford groceries. Credit card delinquencies are sky high. The border is wide open. You'd think she'd be able to name one thing that she would have done differently over the last 4 years, and you know what she says? Nothing comes to mind. That's what she actually said. Go, hand on my heart, that is what Kamala Harris said. And in that moment, she revealed that she is the candidate of more of the same. If you can't afford your groceries, Kamala Harris is the candidate of more of the same. If you're a young person, and I want our young people to be able to afford the American dream of homeownership, right? It's crazy that our young people can't afford to buy a home, and if you're pissed off about that as a young person, as you should be, Kamala Harris is more of the same. If you're a young person thinking about joining the military, or you've got family who have served this great country, by the way, thank you. Thank you for your service. We love you and we appreciate you. But if you think we ought to use the American military not to be the policemen of the world, but to fight for America's national security, then you cannot vote for Kamala Harris. It's that simple. Because whenever she doesn't have a teleprompter telling her what to say, Kamala Harris will admit the truth. Kamala Harris will admit that she is the candidate of higher grocery prices. Kamala Harris will admit that she's the candidate of 28,000 less private sector jobs in just a month. And I know Wisconsin is one of the proudest states in the union when it comes to American craftsmanship and American manufacturing. How can we vote for 4 more years of losing manufacturing jobs? How about we vote for 4 more years of peace and prosperity under Donald J. Trump's leadership? Let's take this country in a different direction. And here, my friends, here's the craziest thing. You know the issue that we haven't really talked that much about? We haven't talked that much about immigration. And that is where Donald Trump's policies worked the best, and frankly, where Kamala Harris's policies have worked the worst. If you could not, if you had tried, pursued a series of policies like Kamala Harris that would more quickly break the American southern border. Remember, she came into office and she was bragging about changing Donald Trump's successful border policy. She said she wanted to open the border, and then she did exactly that. And we know, where was it? Prairie du Chien, where we had a Mexican drug cartel member who was arrested after sexually assaulting a woman and a 12-year-old girl. And Kamala Harris, after opening the southern border and letting tens of thousands, actually the number is 425,000, violent criminals who are in our country because Kamala Harris doesn't enforce our border laws. 425,000 violent illegal immigrant criminals. That's more than double the size of the United States Marine Corps. And you think of this innocent woman and her child who were sexually assaulted by a drug cartel member, and Kamala Harris has the audacity to say that she stands for women and young girls. You know the most important thing, Kamala, if you want to stand for women and young girls, is you want to make our communities safe enough for women and young girls to be able to walk down the street without being sexually assaulted by a criminal that you let into this country. But again, she bragged about doing this, and then she went and did it. And the consequences for the state of Wisconsin, the consequences for our whole country have been extraordinarily bad. And let's just walk through this. Think about all of the fentanyl brought into this country by the Mexican drug cartels. You know the leading cause of death for Wisconsin young people is now fentanyl overdoses? That poison, we do not have to let it into our country. Kamala Harris wants to hire thousands upon thousands of IRS bureaucrats to go after our fellow citizens. Donald J. Trump and I want to wage war on the Mexican drug cartels and stop this poison from coming in the state of Wisconsin. You know, we ought to talk about the fact that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, you've got thousands upon thousands of children in Wisconsin schools who don't even speak English because they're the children of illegal immigrants. And what does that do to the quality of the education for Wisconsin children when you drop thousands upon thousands of people into our Wisconsin school districts who don't even speak the language of the guidance counselors, of the teachers, and of their fellow students. Look at hospital and emergency room wait times in the state of Wisconsin over the last few years. They have skyrocketed because we've got millions upon millions of people in this country who don't have the legal right to be here. And of course, we got to talk about maybe the most dire consequence. The worst is certainly the fentanyl epidemic, but I'd say the second worst problem of all of the illegal immigration coming into this country is that it's made housing unaffordable for our fellow citizens. Because think about this. If you've got 25 million people who don't have the legal right to be here, you got to put them somewhere. And by the way, a lot of them we're putting up at five-star hotels on taxpayer expense paid for by the people in this room. But think about this. Donald Trump and I, we believe that you got to pursue the regulatory policies to build more housing. That's one of the most important things you got to do to make home ownership more affordable. But thank you. But my friends, it doesn't matter how many homes we build. If we allow those homes to go to illegal immigrants, we're never going to make the American dream of homeownership affordable in the United States of America. So yes, Donald J. Trump and I want to build more homes. Yes, Donald J. Trump and I are going to fight to lower mortgage interest rates so that our young people can afford to get out a loan on a house. But the most important thing we're going to do to make American home ownership affordable again is that we're going to ensure that American homes go to American citizens, not to people who don't have the legal right to be here. And you know, Kamala Harris has the audacity to go around and say that the Republicans, she says, don't care about Social Security and Medicare. I was raised by my grandmother who could only put food on the table because of Social Security. We are going to fight for Social Security, but number one way to bankrupt Social Security and Medicare is to do what Kamala Harris is already doing, which is giving it to illegal immigrants. You know how many tens of billions of dollars we spend on Social Security and Medicare benefits for illegal immigrants? And the media and the Democrats will say, well, they're not supposed to. Well, yeah, they're not supposed to, but if you just look at the fraudulent applications, the number of illegal immigrants who are getting Social Security and Medicare, it is going to bankrupt that program. So here's the biggest difference of all, maybe between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. She's rolling out the red carpet for illegal immigration. She's inviting people to come into this country. She's giving them health care, Social Security, and housing benefits paid for by all of you. Donald J. Trump, when he's back in the White House, the message to illegal immigrants is going to be very simple. Pack your bags, because in 3 months you're going back home. Now, let me just leave you with a couple of final thoughts here. My friends, we got to get out there and vote tomorrow. If you look at the early vote numbers, the absentee vote numbers, Republicans, we're doing as well as we ever have in the history of American elections. That's the good news. But the bad news is this is not even close to over yet, and this election, I'm telling you, in the state of Wisconsin, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it is going to be won on Election Day, or it's going to be lost on Election Day. So here's what I'd like all of you to think about is what would you do differently over the next 24 hours if you woke up on Wednesday morning and found out that Kamala Harris had won the state of Wisconsin by 90 votes? You think that sounds crazy? That was the margin in Florida in 2000 was that tiny. So ask yourself, what would you do differently over the next 24 hours if you knew that we were going to lose by 90 votes? Because that is what you should be doing. Because if every single person in this room tried to bank as many votes on Election Day tomorrow, it's very simple. Donald J. Trump is going to be the next president of the United States, and we're going to take this country back. That is what's on the table. So my request is very simple. I want every single person in this beautiful room, every single one of you, I want you to get out there and vote 10 times. Now we got the media is going to say, the headline is JD Vance comes to Wisconsin and encourages mass voter fraud. No. Here is the legal way to vote 10 times, and that's what I want you to do, is to get yourself to the polls tomorrow and get 9 of your friends and family to come along with you. That's how you vote 10 times, and that's what we got to do. Because think about the stakes of this election, my friends. Think about what's really going on here. This is not about red team versus blue team, Republicans versus Democrats. We got a lot of Democrats and a lot of independents who are going to vote for Donald J. Trump tomorrow, a lot who already have. And, of course, we're proud to have them. This is not even just about beating Kamala Harris, as fun as it's going to be to beat Kamala Harris tomorrow. And trust me, I'm going to enjoy it more than anybody in this room. Here's the thing. Our fellow citizens are struggling. Their lives could be so much better, so much healthier, so much wealthier and more prosperous, but only if we fix the leadership in Washington, D.C. I've met so many people over the last few months that I wish I could take every person in this room on the Trump-Vance plane and just show you the perspective that I've gotten over this country over the last few months, because it's made me love America even more than I already did. There are people... You know, Ush and I have 3 beautiful little kids, a 7-year-old boy, a 4-year-old boy, and a 2-year-old girl. I met a woman a few weeks ago, actually, in Michigan, and she told me that she couldn't afford her groceries. She was getting involved in politics. She was one of our grassroots volunteers. Told me she couldn't afford groceries, but that every single night she said a prayer for me, for my wife, and for our 3 kids, and she knew their names, first, middle, and last, because she said a prayer for them every single day. A woman who can't afford groceries has got the generosity of spirit to pray for me and my family. I met a woman a few months ago who told me that she was worried about canceling a family ritual. For 40 years, she and her husband, in good times and bad, had done steak night on a Friday night. But last year, for the first time, they canceled steak night because groceries had gotten so expensive under Kamala Harris's leadership that they just couldn't afford it anymore. I met so many parents of teenagers who took something under peer pressure at a party, like, let's be honest, a lot of teenagers do. But instead of waking up the next morning with a lecture from their parents or maybe a headache, they paid for that mistake with their lives, because that mistake was laced with fentanyl brought in by the Mexican drug cartels. I've met veterans. I've met the families of our brave service members who died 3 years ago in Afghanistan, who are, of course, heartbroken that they lost their loved one, but they're most angry at Kamala Harris because there's been no accountability for the fact that their 13 loved ones lost their lives and nobody got fired, and there's been no accountability for the fact that those young people died from government incompetence. Think about all of our fellow citizens, all those people who can't pay their credit card bills, all those people who can't afford their prescription drugs, and they could do so much better if we fix the leadership in this country. So over the next 24 hours, I want you to think about them. I want you to think about the woman who deserves to have steak night with her husband. I want you to think about all of our families who deserve to raise their children in safe and secure neighborhoods. I want you to think about the veterans who put on the uniform every single day and deserve to have a president who respects and fights for them. I want you to think about all of the American citizens who could be living a better life if they simply had better leadership in Washington, D.C.